Laser sights can deter threats and aid in quick target identification, enhancing your ability to protect your family, home, and country. Crimson Trace, making laser sights standard equipment. Learn more at crimsontrace.com.
Hey, y'all. It's Tom Gresham's Gun Talk. Oh, look out. Oh, we're smoking.
Indeed we are. Smoking for sure, I guarantee you. Tom Gresham here, 866-TALK-GUN, or just dial Tom Talk Gun, get you in here. We're going to be talking about guns and holsters and scopes and ammo and pistols and rifles and revolvers and shotguns and, well, pretty much anything else that you want to talk about. We'll talk about anything that has to do with guns. It seems to be not as well understood as you would think. You'd think, okay, well, this is just history. History is facts. We understand what it is. And yet there are some, particularly some in the academic world, who will actually publish books, in one case, one that got all sorts of awards. Then they came to find out it was just totally bogus. A book saying that, well, guns were just not that important in history. And Americans really didn't own many guns. And it won big book publishing awards. And then the academic who made it all up had to give back the award in the awards and suffered all sorts of heinous things in the academic world. Yeah, right. Fascinating. So there's a new book out, and it is titled First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun from the Revolution to Today by David Harsanyi. And David joins us right now. Hey, David, welcome to Gun Talk.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So as you go through this and just think about this, is there one or more areas where you think, generally speaking, much of the public is either misinformed or just doesn't understand the role of firearms in America?
Well, I do. I mean, I think I came to this from a political angle initially because I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment for ideological reasons. I grew up in New York in a place where not a lot of people had guns at all, which is meaning only criminals basically had guns. And so I wanted to understand the culture better for a long time. And I think that people misunderstand the ideological background of it. The right to self-defense and the right to bear arms goes back in British law even further than the right to free speech or the right to freedom of religion. It's a natural right for a very long time. But also I think people, because they get so involved in the politics of it, don't really understand how important guns were in commerce and in culture and in the individual lives of Americans from the very beginning, from the first people who came here from England.
Well, what was the primary role of firearms to the first people who came here?
Well, initially for just survival and defense. They used it for hunting, obviously, and but they also used it to defend themselves. The Pilgrims, on their initial landing, were attacked by Indians immediately and had to defend themselves with muskets. But then, obviously, as people moved westward, and they kept doing that till maybe the 50s even, they needed guns, obviously, for all those things. But also, in a way, and it was very surprising reading the literature and stuff of the 19th century, you know, how people romanticized and idealized the gun as being intricately tied to patriotism in America. And I think that modern historians often purposely actually ignore that fact.
Now, why would they do that?
Well, because they want to ban gun, they want more gun control. And to do that, you have to sort of push this myth that the rights of the right to bear arms is a collective right, for people in militias and things like that, not something for the individual. So to do that, you have to basically revise or throw out the history of the gun in America, which was an individual right from the beginning. The reason they didn't talk about it all the time was because it was like such a non-starter. It was like breathing the air or something like, or going to church. People owned them and had them, and no one really questioned that right until probably the 1930s.
It's interesting you put it that way, because you're right. Way back, the idea of you have a gun for self-protection, for providing food, for protecting your family. That was, trying to explain that to someone would be like saying, well, here, let me explain to you that we need to breathe. Right. It's like everybody would go, well, yeah, why are we even talking about it?
I mean, we wouldn't even, people on the sort of outskirts of society, for instance, they wouldn't be able to survive without guns. It would have been impossible for them. And, The idea that some government person would come or the state would come and say you have to ask for permission to defend yourself is the antithesis of what the whole Constitution is about in many ways. I think how people treat the Second Amendment tells you a lot about how they think about freedom in general, and that's why it's so important, and that's why it's the first freedom.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I like that. How that people treat the Second Amendment tells you what they think about freedom. And I find in the discussions, we have a lot of people in America who, and I put in my armchair psychologist role here, I think maybe they know that they are not protecting themselves and their family. They're not doing everything they should do. And the fact that I am and others are stands as stark evidence and contrast to what they're doing. And if they can make sure that we're not taking care of ourselves, then they don't have to feel bad about not taking care of themselves and their family. Is that going too far?
I think that's definitely the case with some people. I think that's definitely part of it. I think the other part of it is that a lot of those people that you're mentioning and others view the government very differently. They view it as a protector all the time, and they don't want you to rely on yourself, because the more you rely on the state, the more important the state is, and that's what they want it to be in your life. It's already too important in my estimation, already too big and too invasive, but they want it to be more of that. And I think guns are one of the things that are a very tangible thing that they can take away from you or not allow you to have. It's something that they view as unsafe, and it can be when used by bad people, but of course not when it's used by the right people, and their laws typically just inhibit good people from having guns, not bad people. So
when you talk, and you've done a lot of research for this book, the title of the book, by the way, is First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun from the Revolution to Today. It's basically the history of the gun and the role it played in America throughout. When you talk to people, do you find that there are a considerable number of people who really don't know what the role of the firearm was, or think it was much less than it actually was?
That it's much less. Yeah, I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, and I would say that most people I mention the sort of stories of the gun never knew about how important it was. I mean, just take Sam Colt, for instance. People understand what an incredible personality was, how he changed the world with interchangeable parts long before Henry Ford did anything of that nature. And they don't understand that he was sort of the first industrialist, and that guns were such a big deal, and that he sold them and changed the way that we sell things to people, and he went to England and opened a factory, all those things. I don't think that historians glorify him in the way they do other inventors, for instance, because it was guns, and they view guns in a negative way.
Well, once you start doing your research, you realize that the Industrial Revolution in America hinged upon firearms. It was interchangeable parts. It was all of these advancements that we take for granted, and that, as you say, people attribute to Henry Ford. No. Sam Colt was doing it. Remington was doing it. The people making guns were doing it long before. And that was, Gun Valley was where the Industrial Revolution actually took place.
Yeah, absolutely. The first Industrial Revolution driven by gun manufacturing. I mean, there were other things involved, but gun manufacturers were on the cutting edge of the technology of the day. Sam Colt had his factory in Hartford, and it reminds me, when I read about it, it reminds me a little about like Google or something today, where people lived on campus and they were very immersed in like the business aspect of it. But he was an amazing man, and it wasn't just him. There were many engineers out there doing incredible things, and guns definitely were a big driving part of that commerce in America.
And I'm looking at some of the chapters you have here, the Peace Dividend. You're talking about, modern rifles, the fall and rise of sharpshooters, with a quote from Chris Kyle. You got, you really are tracking kind of the role of firearms. What's the goal? Why did you do this book in the first place? Well,
I've been, mostly I write about politics, and I've been very involved in the debates over the Second Amendment for, 15 years. And it's very important to me, even though I live in places where it's hard to get guns, or maybe because I live in those places. But the reason was, I think that we're always arguing about the ideology and the politics of guns and the safety and the mass shootings and kind of those things, and they're important to talk about. But what we'd never talk about is why guns are sort of embedded in the DNA of this country, and why people, people always ask me, why is America so different? What's with the gun culture? Wherever I go, they're always sort of, sneering at the gun culture. Well, it didn't just pop up in, 1977. It's been around from the beginning, and I wanted people to know what that story was and why the guy who's buying a gun today, a shotgun, AR-15, whatever, why he has that gun and why he cares about that gun and why he is responsible with that gun, and he understands maybe the history, even if he doesn't know every part of it. He's part of a sort of a cultural continuum,
And he or she feels an intrinsic connection to, and I don't care if it's John Wayne, the mythical West, or the real West, or to the Revolutionary War, or the people who founded the country because they had their own personal firearms, which is all we really had to speak of. Whether they can voice it or not, they feel it. They know it. They know that they are simply the latest in the continuation from 230 years ago.
Right. I mean, and it might, I can't think of anything else offhand right now that has that connects people who stood at Lexington to people today in America, as meaning as a sort of thing that they owned and had. And I'm sure there are others, but it is a very American thing, and you mentioned every weapon was a personal weapon. So after the Minutemen were fighting the British, no one asked them to hand their weapons back after, and the men who stood at Lexington and Concord, they were protecting a cache of weapons and powder. They weren't fighting for, income inequality or whatever. I don't want to diminish other issues, but they were fighting because someone was coming to take their means of defending themselves and survival away. And, historians sort of diminish that fact all the time, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to write a book about it.
Well, I would recommend the book because I think when people get this, when they read it, they will then be able, this is the value in it. Certainly getting the information is one value. But a more material, maybe more practical value is once you've read First Freedom, you will be able to explain to people what is the gun culture, what is it with you gun people, why do you like your guns so much, what's the deal here, and you'll be able to say, well, look, take a deep breath, let me explain to you what the deal is, and they will have gotten that information from what I think is a really excellent book, David. Congratulations.
I appreciate you saying that very much, and thank you.
Absolutely. It's available on Amazon and other places, called First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun. Thank you, David. Appreciate that. All right, got to scoot here, 866-TALK-GUN. What is on your mind? We'll go open lines now. If there's a gun you want to tell me about, a range report you'd like to deliver, or if you'd like to just tell me what it was like for you, for your family, for your friends, for your discussions at work, going through the Kavanaugh hearings, I would love to get your take on that. Yes, it's a little bit of a diversion, but I think it's important that we can go there. 866-TALK-GUN.
For more than 70 years, Timney Triggers has been enhancing the shooter's experience. Whether it's a local competition, a day at the range, or even the hunt of a lifetime, setting the standard in aftermarket triggers, Timney is now producing more than 170 models of triggers for bolt-action rifles, shotguns, AR rifles, and semi-automatic rifles. Proudly made in the USA since 1946. Find your new trigger at TimneyTriggers.com.
For 36 years, the U.S. Sportsmen's Alliance has been fighting to protect hunting, fishing, and trapping for sportsmen from coast to coast. Today, we are under constant attack from extremist animal rights groups who want to end your ability to hunt in the U.S. Join us to protect our sporting heritage and our way of life outdoors. To join or for more information on how you can help, go to ussportsman.org. That's ussportsman.org.
Attacks happen every day. How will you react? See real people put into real-life criminal attack situations on First Person Defender. Discover what works and what doesn't. Kidnapping, ATM robbery, home invasion, and other attacks. Learn how to save your life and the lives of your family. Get the entire first season on DVD at shopguntalk.com. Get prepared. Shopguntalk.com.
Your everyday carry advantage. The new M&P Shield M2.0 pistol from Smith & Wesson. has the enhancements of the M2.0 line with aggressive grip texture and a crisp and lighter trigger pull. Extremely thin and lightweight, you can carry it all day. Also available with an integrated Crimson Trace laser in 9 or 40. The M&P Shield M2.0. Visit smith-wesson.com.
Are you looking for a place to shoot? The National Shooting Sports Foundation has a great website called wheretoshoot.org. It's the largest database of shooting ranges on the internet. It's also a great resource for shooters where you can find video tips, printable targets, and a lot more. Find it online at wheretoshoot.org. And while you're there, download their free iPhone app. That's wheretoshoot.org.
Interesting. I'd love to get your take on the whole Kavanaugh hearings here. As you sat through it, you watched it. Well, first of all, did you watch it? I could not tear myself away. It was excruciatingly painful, some of it, to watch not just the willingness, but the eagerness on the part of some of the Democratic leaders to be nasty, to show the world that they're just a-holes. And I'm sorry, but there it is. Proud of it. Spartacus moment. Really? Give me a break. Tom here in the control room just got a text from a couple of his friends saying that they're switching from the Democrat Party. I wonder, they can't be isolated. They have to, and I don't care which side of the fence you're on. It would be, I don't know how anybody could watch that and not be disgusted. And I know it's not true. I know a lot of people thought, well, this is brave, and they're being courageous, and, they're standing up for this woman. No, they were using her. The poor woman was, I'm talking about Dr. Ford. One of the more horrendous things is that she was offered a chance to do this in private. She did not want her name to come out. She did not want to do it in private, or in public. And she was offered the chance, and that information was offered, through the Democrats and through her attorney, and evidently they chose to not tell her that she had that option. Her attorney and the Democrat leadership did not want her to be able to deliver her story in private as she wanted to do. Even though, of course, she'd been promised, we'll keep this confidential. Because it didn't serve their political purpose to have it done in private. They needed, not for her to be out there speaking, they needed to be seen hammering Judge Kavanaugh and supporting her and trying to take the moral high ground. Maine Senator Susan Collins surprised a lot of us. Not a particularly conservative person, but clearly a thinking person and an honest person and a person with a sense of morals and what's right. And she called it as it was when she called out the Democrats and just said, you guys used her. And what you did was abominable. And it was. So I just don't know how most people reacted to it. I couldn't step away. It was like watching a slow motion car wreck that you can't stop watching. Mike's on line 3 out of Dodge City, Kansas. Hey, Mike, you were listening to this. What was going on?
Well, I was listening to, I believe it's Michelle Mitchell, the lady that they had, that the Republicans had come in to question Mrs. Ford, Professor Ford, Dr. Ford. And I was yelling at her questions that she should be asking, which I kept coming up with. And I'm out in the middle of 200 acres working the field, and I'm yelling at the radio.
Well, evidently you weren't the only one because, of course, the Republicans basically kicked her out and took over the questioning because they didn't like where it was going because she was just doing softballs. And, and I'm sorry for Dr. Ford. I don't know what happened to her.
I don't know either.
I don't know if anything happened to her, and I know that really drives me crazy when I say that, because you're supposed to believe all women, except for all the reports we're getting now. They're popping up everywhere, false accusations that people find out about. But defending yourself against this is close to impossible. Close to impossible.
Yes. Yes. Well, I listened to all those questions. I liked her after report. I was able to listen to it and all the holes that she found in the questioning that she did. I thought at first she was just terrible. Mm-hmm. But after listening to her report that she did afterwards, the breakdown of it, and all the holes in Dr. Ford's testimony, I thought, well, she did a better job than I even thought she was doing.
Yeah, she came out afterwards and she said, no prosecutor would take this case, basically. There's just nothing here. There's nothing you could take action on. You can't possibly take action against this man on the basis of what we saw and heard here.
Yes. Yes, but like I said, I was sitting out in the middle of a field. I was working, but yelling at the radio with questions that I had, and nobody heard me.
Well, a lot of us were yelling. Let me bounce this off of you. You're in Kansas. And we keep hearing that, women are energized by this because women are in the Me Too movement, and women are, going to march to the polls and vote Democrat. And yet, and I don't know, maybe that's true on the coasts. But where I live, and I'm wondering where you live, I can't tell you how many women have said, this is horrible. I can't imagine this happening to my son or my husband. What are you hearing?
That's what I'm hearing from several women. Now, there's a couple of women that still believe in Bill and Hillary Clinton. They believe in Obama, and they are still going to vote that way. They don't care about the facts. It's almost like a mindset you cannot penetrate to get in any information. They will not listen to you or hear you. They once they find out where you're coming from, they just get mad, turn around, and leave.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, and I appreciate the call. Yeah, they get mad, turn around and leave. It's like this friend of mine who says, if you don't agree with me, I have no use for you. What? How do you have a conversation? Certainly, you have to be able to believe that someone who disagrees with you does so in good faith, and you can have a conversation about it. Otherwise, I fear we are lost.
A girl can't go wrong with something in basic black, like an AR-15.
Some things never go out of style, like Tom Gresham's Gun Talk.
All right, back with the 866 Talk Gun. Get you in here. We have some people on hold, but we do have a couple of lines open if you'd like to join us right now. Again, just call Tom Talk Gun. Let's see, line 2, Jill's with us out of Richmond, Virginia. Jill, thank you for your patience. I'm glad you made it on to Gun Talk.
Hello. I think there is more involved than wanting to get rid of guns. I think a lot of these people are against the very principle of self-defense itself. Not only in politics, you'll see it in schools. Don't hit somebody back. You suppose if somebody does something wrong, like starting to beat up on you in the hallway, you're supposed to come and tell someone about it. Oh, yeah. When he's hitting you in the hallway, it's already too late to tell somebody. This kind of, it's a contemptibly hypocritical cop-out.
I think it's a great point. We're teaching kids, in fact, if your child is attacked in school and fights back to defend herself, she gets the same punishment as the attacker now. That's just weird.
That's the truth. Yeah, I remember when I was in school, though, this didn't happen. A boy who's a little taller than me, I don't remember why, he started to try to punch me, and just as my father had told me, I knocked his fist aside with my wrist and popped him in the face and gave him a bloody lip. I think it was his lip, may have been his nose. He threatened to tell the principal, and in my naivete, I was sure the principal would side with me. However, apparently he didn't tell because he was afraid of being laughed at or something.
Let me ask you a question. Did he ever bother you again?
Not that I recall.
No, I wouldn't think so. Thank you so much for your call, Jill. I think you're right on point there. Robert's on 4 out of Oakhurst, California. Hey, Robert, what's the view from California?
The view, I'm on the right side of the state anyway. I want to congratulate you, though, on coming around about the Democrats. I remember hearing you, and I watched your growth. And I have a sister who's a Democrat, and she's pretty radical too. And I've seen through it forever. It's like the Democrats. Is there a Democrat who supports the Second Amendment? I can't think of any. Can you?
Oh, you get some to give you a little bit. Joe Manchin is probably as close as we get, and you never know there. But yeah, but my whole thing, Robert, and let me bounce this off of you, is there probably are still Democrats that I could agree with on some things. Democrats, I'm talking about elected politicians now. The problem is, though, every elected politician you put in who is a Democrat, it reinforces the power of the Pelosi, Feinstein, Barbara, the whole cabal, if you will, of the ultra-leftists, so that even if you say, well, this is a good Democrat, a vote for that person is actually a vote for Pelosi and Feinstein.
And they're all from California. And we're heading towards Venezuela.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I appreciate the call, and yeah, I don't like that this is where we are. I wish we had a system where you could say, let's just choose the right person regardless of party, but that's just not the way it is. And to do that, to vote, honestly, if you're a person who supports gun rights, you can't. I'm sorry, you just can't vote for any Democrat. Even if that person individually is okay on gun rights, that person helps Pelosi and Feinstein simply by being there and being a vote, being a person on the Democrat side, and gets them control of Congress, and they get to decide who heads up the committees. They get to decide which laws or bills get brought up for a vote, and they get to decide who is going to be confirmed for Supreme Court justices. I said every single week leading up to the 2016 election, this election was not about Hillary Clinton and it was not about Donald Trump. It was about the United States Supreme Court. We now see that coming to pass. Imagine, if you will, if Hillary Clinton was president. Just process that for a second. Let's see. Eric's on line 1 out of Olympia, Washington. Eric, Washington State. Of course, you're in the middle of it there, aren't you?
Oh, boy. You have no idea.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
So what was your take as you're watching these hearings?
I recoiled in horror. I really got a good glimpse of what these people are capable of. They're totalitarians at heart. They'll stop at nothing to gain and keep power, and they're the same type of people who destroyed Venezuela. For that reason, I'll never allow them to take my guns. You cannot disarm yourself in the face of people like this.
Let me ask you a question. I'm going to put you on the spot, okay?
Yeah.
Because nobody knows who you are really. When you say you will never let them take your guns, what does that mean?
Well, that means if it ever comes down to the point where they're collecting guns, it's time to use your guns. That's what it means.
And I think that's what it means for millions of people. I appreciate the call. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I love the meme I saw that said, now let's see, there's 100 million gun owners, and we have 300 million guns, and we have 1 trillion rounds of ammunition. Two things. One, if we were the problem, I think you'd know it. But the other thing is, have you really thought this through? We had a call from a lady that did not want to be on the air, Joy. But she wanted to point out something, and I just wanted to pass this along. She says, Dr. Ford, what she said was liars like Ford set things back for the Me Too movement for actual rape victims. I don't know if she was raped. Don't know if she was assaulted. Don't know. Don't know if this was, what do they call that, recovered memories or something. I don't know. I am convinced that Brett Kavanaugh was not the attacker. But I do agree with Joy. I think this has set back that movement. It's energized an awful lot of people who say, you should believe everyone. Well, that's just stupid. Are you 6 years old? I mean, you don't believe all accusers. That's nuts. That's why we have evidence. That's why we have hearings. That's why we have trials. That's why we have corroboration. Yeah, due process. Believe all accusers? What kindergarten world are you living in? And just do this. Go do an internet search. Use DuckDuckGo or Google, whatever you use, for sexual assault accusations that turned out to be false. Duke Lacrosse. Just saw a story about the Mean Girl group that kept accusing this boy of sexual assault in school. They ended up getting him arrested, handcuffed, shackled. His ankles were shackled as he was taken out of school, charged with the crime. Turns out they made it all up. Now, in my world, they're going to get charged with a crime, and they're going to get handcuffed, and they're going to get shackled, and they're going to get drugged out of school, and they're going to get prosecuted. Doesn't seem to be the world we're living in. Were you as excited about the Kavanaugh selection as me? And, even more so, were you as disgusted at watching these hearings? 866-TALK-GUN.
Founded with the singular purpose of building fine sporting firearms, Kimber creates a handgun for every person and a rifle for every adventure. While embracing modern manufacturing techniques, every Kimber depends on practiced hands for assembly, fit, and finish. There's no compromise in features, materials, or performance. Synonymous with quality, precision, and excellence, and made in America. Kimber is what all guns should be. Visit KimberAmerica.com. That's KimberAmerica.com.
Perhaps more than any other landscape, wetlands embody the life-giving abundance that nature has to offer. And perhaps more than any other organization, Ducks Unlimited is working to ensure that our continent's wetlands not only survive, but thrive for generations well beyond this one. The time is now to band together. The time is now to rescue our wetlands.
You got your carry permit, and that's good. But you know you could use more training. Get the DVDs, which have what you need. Springfield Armory presents Concealed Carry 1 and Concealed Carry 2 with Bata Group. Learn specific concealed carry skills from Top Gun fighting trainers. Get trained. Be prepared. This really is life and death. ShopGunTalk.com. That's ShopGunTalk.com.
When the U.S. military's elite units and law enforcement agencies across the globe demanded innovation and reliability, they didn't settle. They chose Sig Sauer. When world champion professional shooters demanded precision accuracy, they didn't settle. They chose Sig Sauer. So it's no surprise more and more civilian gun owners are refusing to settle for anything less. They're choosing Sig Sauer firearms, ammunition, electro-optics, suppressors, air guns, and training. Sig Sauer. Never settle.
$866-TALK-GUN is the magic number here. We're talking about Brett Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Justice. Now, starts work on Tuesday, lifetime appointment. What could it mean for gun rights? Well, a lot, actually. In the 10 years since the Heller decision was passed down from the Supreme Court, lower courts have ignored it in droves. Basically, once they figured out the Supreme Court wasn't going to take it back up, that the Supreme Court was not going to back up its decision, the lower courts just started thumbing their noses at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has turned down several opportunities to hear gun-related cases, whether it was bans on semi-automatic rifles, a limit on number of cartridges a magazine could hold, rules on who could get a concealed carry permit, waiting periods for firearms purchases, and more. These were brought to the Supreme Court, and they decided not to hear them. As a result, the lower courts just said, oh, well, Heller doesn't actually mean anything. We can do whatever we want to. So we can go back to the bad old days of restricting gun rights. And the thing is, if the Supreme Court doesn't do anything about it, that's the law of the land. When the Ninth Circuit says that's the law, unless the Supreme Court overturns it. And if the court won't take the case, then that just sits there and remains the law. Fascinating. So not only have the courts been doing that, but states and municipalities have been passing laws that restrict gun rights that should be unconstitutional, that are unconstitutional, that do violate the Heller decision. But they know they can because they know there's no backstop there. There's no Supreme Court going to take action. So what we're thinking is that probably Kavanaugh is going to be really influential on this. We think. Don't know what John Roberts is going to do. I understand that. Now, I love this quote from the Vice President of Litigation at the Brady Campaign and Center to Prevent Gun Violence says, you've got to listen to this, Judge Kavanaugh must tell the American public whether he will protect their most important right, the right to be safe from gun violence. What? I have read the Constitution. I have not seen a right to be safe from gun violence. Let's see. Gun violence is down 70% in the last 20 years. Let's examine this real carefully so that we kind of get this figured out. During the last 20 years, tens of millions of guns have been sold. 10 million or more people have gotten their permits to carry loaded guns concealed for their own self-protection. Billions and billions of rounds of ammunition have been sold. So more guns, more people carrying loaded guns, billions of rounds of ammunition, and gun violence is down by 70%, according to the FBI's Uniform Crime Reports. They're brain dead. I'm sorry, they're brain dead. Simple as that. Line 3, Dan is with us out of Reed Point, Montana. Dan, you're on Gun Talk.
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to follow up on what you were talking about just a short time ago. Mm-hmm. If you vote for a Democrat who is supposedly pro-gun, for example, John Tester here in Montana,
right?
He may vote for good bills that promote the Second Amendment. However, he also voted against both Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, and he voted for Kagan and Sotomayor, Sotomayor being one of the worst. So it goes beyond just being along with Pelosi and Schumer.
That's an excellent point, because with the extremely rare exception, they're going to vote party line. And basically, what that means is they are going to do what Pelosi and Feinstein tell them to do.
Correct.
So I go back to a vote for any Democrat is a vote for Pelosi and Feinstein.
But it's also a vote for an anti-gun jurist on the Supreme Court.
Absolutely, because the vote that you just placed for Feinstein and Pelosi means that they get to choose the jurist they want on the Supreme Court. It all goes back to any Democrat who gets elected is another piece of power for the Democratic leadership, whether it's opposing Gorsuch and Kavanaugh or supporting Kagan and Sotomayor or all the rest of it. It's an excellent point, Dan. I appreciate that. But you're right. And yeah, I know I was slow coming to it, and I get it. I don't like the way it is, but you know what? Pretending something is not the way it is foolish. It's childish. It's immature. And it's counterproductive in this case. And we have to figure this out and say, okay, this is real simple. My deal is no Democrats ever. Never in my lifetime will I ever vote for one. Simple as that. we're back. 866-TALK-GUN. Get you in your line one. Jim's with us out of Nebraska. Hey, Jim, you're on Gun Talk. What's up?
Yes. Judge Kavanaugh, I'm glad that he was confirmed. Mm-hmm. I could not listen to Mrs. Ford. I couldn't listen to her. Couldn't stand her voice. I knew she was a liar. But Mr. Kavanaugh, I have reservations on him. He is a Bush person. He's from the swamp. He's spent his whole life in Washington, D.C. I'm afraid he's going to be more of a Justice Roberts than one of the conservative judges.
More Roberts than Scalia.
Oh, yes, by far. And that's my fear.
Well, I understand, given the background. Let me throw this at you, though. I'm looking at what Judge Kavanaugh wrote in 2011 in a case where he actually dissented with the district court, D.C. court. He said that, quote, it would strain logic and common sense that the Second Amendment would allow semi-automatic handguns, but not semi-automatic rifles, which have not traditionally been banned and are in common use today, and thus are protected under Heller. His point was these assault weapons, so-called assault weapons bans, they don't ban semi-automatic handguns. He says, I'm sorry, that does not stand. That doesn't make any sense at all. And Heller says anything in common use cannot be banned. And so he actually talked about that during the hearings as well. That speaks pretty well for him from where I'm sitting.
I just don't like his association with Bushes. It's
well, I don't disagree with you there because the Bushes were no friends of gun owners.
I voted for both of them in that I voted against who the Democrat was. I would not have voted for either one of them had there been some conservative choice.
Yep, I agree. Look, here's the thing. Ronald Reagan was not a friend of gun owners. All right, we go all the way back there. People are, Ronald Reagan. No, he did not do us any favors.
No,
he just happened to be better than. He just happened to be better than the alternative. Bushes were not friends to gun owners. They were just better than the alternative. In this case, yeah, he served under Bush and he worked there. I am more enthusiastic, perhaps, and maybe a little bit less cautious than you are in this one. Now, understand, I don't think you get an absolute rabid, Second Amendment person in any of these folks. Having said that, his history of decisions is really good and really strong on the Second Amendment. I think we're going to be okay.
Okay. Justice Thomas is probably, in my opinion, the most gun-friendly of the justices. What do you think of him?
I agree completely. I think you're on the money. He has several times invited cases to come, wish we could get some of these. And then when they were turning them down, he would write, it looks like we're turning the Second Amendment into a second-class law or amendment or right, and also saying that, we're basically turning our backs on Heller. So Thomas has been strong. I think you're going to find that the Kavanaugh-Thomas connection is going to be strong as well. So we'll find out, I guess. I mean, that's where we are. And again, thank you for your call. And I'm not saying you're wrong, and I think it's good to be cautious. But hey, you know what? We have him, and ultimately, as I say, this is what the election was about. What was it? Barack Obama said, elections have consequences. Yeah, well, he was trying to stuff it in our face when he said that. But it works back the other way. We, the people, spoke. We elected Donald Trump because we wanted the Supreme Court. That's why we voted him in. Pretty much was the primary reason for a lot of us. Simple as that. Hey, when we come back, there's a new company, actually an old company, getting into gun optics. You're going to want to hear it because you already like this company.